Oh,
Okay, and with that, we
awesome.
welcome one and all to tonight's program. I'm Mark Pinto here with you at Phoenixville Public Library. Tonight we're featuring a program exploring what happens when the power of the ocean and the fury of Mother Nature coincide at a favorite summer vacation destination for many of us, the New Jersey shore. And with us tonight is Scott Mazzella, who is co-author of Great Storms of the Jersey Shore. Scott, thanks for being here and sharing your amazing images and stories with our patrons.
Thanks for having me. All right, so just jump right in, or do you have any announcements?
Yeah, you can jump right. Oh, just if you have any questions, folks, just wait until after the presentation, and then you can feel free to unmute yourselves and ask them at that time. So please hold questions till the end. All right, thanks.
I'm going to now attempt to share my screen, and hopefully this works. All right, can you see my PowerPoint?
Yep.
Yes.
All right. Okay, cool. Now we can start. So thanks for having me. I'm Scott Mazzella, and I'm going to talk about the great storms of the Jersey Shore through history. A lot of it is the LBI area, but the book does cover the entire Jersey Shore. I'm also the author of Surviving Sandy, which is more Long Beach Island centric, full of stories of survival from Sandy. So if you want to purchase either of those, just hang out after the meeting. I could do that through the internet, through Venmo, and get you a signed copy. All right, so let's see. There we go. All right, so we're all intrigued by weather, I would imagine. Otherwise, you wouldn't probably be here tonight. This is a photo I took when I should have been eating dinner at a restaurant with my family. I was the one doofus standing up taking pictures through the window because the storm was roaring outside. This is Rumson, New Jersey, and the restaurant was called, is called Salt Creek Grill, and it's right on the Navasink River. You can see a bolt of lightning in the distance. I'm always that guy. From childhood on, I was driving my mom nuts, going outside in storms, and always glued to the window when there's lightning, and probably similar to some of you when storms come around. Now, what I want to do now is see if you guys can tell me who said this. Okay, now we're talking about being intrigued by the weather. What famous person said this? Okay, it's good God, what horror and destruction! It is impossible for me to describe it or for you to form any idea of it. It seemed as if a total dissolution of nature was taking place. The roaring of the sea and wind, fiery meters flying about in the air, the prodigious glare of almost perpetual lightning, the crash of falling houses, and the ear-piercing shrieks of the distressed were sufficient to strike astonishment into angels. Whole families roaming about the streets, the sick exposed to the keenness of water and air, in a word, misery in its most hideous shapes. Anybody have an idea? Or even what storm this might have been from? It's a tough one. Unfortunately, I can't see if anybody is wanted to talk, but I'll let you think about it for a second.
Put it in the chat, folks, if you have an answer.
Yeah, I can't see the chat, unfortunately, but
Yeah, I'll let you know if there's anything there.
okay, nobody yet?
Nobody yet.
All right, I'm going to tell you. It's Alexander Hamilton. Okay, a lot of people in previous talks, a lot of people guess well-known people from the 1900s, the 20th century, and maybe even more recently. But this shows that even way back in Hamilton's time, people were intrigued by weather. We all know Ben Franklin was intrigued, right? He was a scientist. He was very curious about lightning and electricity. But here we have Hamilton, who's writing about it. And it proved to people that meteorology or weather is not, what's the term they use? Not uninteresting or not disinteresting. So that's their nice way of saying people are into it. Just like you guys. Now, I'm going to show you a lot of pictures today of damage and destruction done by storms. But check out if there are people in the pictures, check them out. Check out their faces. Okay, we always forget because we're shocked about the destruction around people that, there are actually people that are involved here. There are people that were impacted, some of them severely. Look at their faces. Like this little girl is sad. Clearly, this is after Hurricane of 44. She had to be rescued in a pretty dramatic way with her family, and I guess this is her first time back. She's probably a little bit scared. But in all the pictures that you see of weather and people posing with destruction, you'll see all sorts of emotions, from fright to shock to tears, like the guy in the bottom left who just found out that his home washed out to sea after the hurricane of 44. Some are amused, like the guy in the flood in the middle picture on the left. He's just taking a picture. I mean, that could be Beach Haven after any storm today. Beach Haven floods so quickly. That happens to be, I believe that's right where Kapler's Pharmacy is today. You have some people just accepting what's happened, like the woman and the cop on the bottom picture. There was a garage there. The whole thing was ripped off. And the woman in the middle, she's just posing with something she'll probably never get to see again. Naval destroyer washed up on the beach on the southern tip of Long Beach Island after the 62 nor'easter. So just watch out for the people and their expressions. I used to do a lot of storm talks without even mentioning that before, but I like to show the people now just to remember that people were always impacted in these situations. So this is Seabright in 1885. It's just an illustration of the destruction that happened after a hurricane there. This is the risk. We all know the risk down the shore. If you have a shore house or you vacation down the shore and you have a favorite place, there's always an inherent risk living at the shore. You're next to the ocean. You're kind of out in the elements, the mercy of storms and the sea. So why do we do this? Well, because this is the reward, right? You go down to enjoy the beach. You make memories there. Oftentimes, whole families make memories there. Generations of families make memories there. And the good days far, far outweigh the bad days, even if a lot of those days have greenhead flies. But the reward is there for you. That's why people risk living there and vacationing there and investing money in there. All right, so here is a map from the book. It doesn't include the last year or so, but this is just to give you an idea of the basic way the most major hurricanes have traveled around New Jersey. Now, you can kind of get a sense that most of them go from southwest to northeast, almost like a hurricane highway off the coast. Not quite the Caribbean in terms of the frequency, but frequent enough. And we just saw last week Hurricane Henri take a path right up into just about Rhode Island area. But you can see here that over time, we've had several storms and the general path is usually the same. There's a couple outliers, but there's one definite outlier that's not a hurricane at landfall, but it started life as a hurricane. I bet you could see pretty easily which one I'm talking about. This is 2012, and that's Sandy, which came in perpendicular to shore. The dreaded worst case scenario for any storm.
There's a question that came up in the chat about is Hurricane Agnes from 1972 there?
I can't see the number under that 1970 something. Oh, I can't. That's 1976. I don't think Agnes is on there. The gentleman who put this graphic together, I think, had put. Did Agnes hit as a hurricane? Or was it a tropical storm when it hit?
If you could hear me, it was a tropical storm.
Okay. Yeah, so I don't think he included every tropical storm. I think he was going for hurricanes, although he did include Irene because I requested it when I made it, but when he made it. And you may see that from time to time in this presentation where I don't focus on any particular storm from the past that you might know of. I pretty much focus on the biggies. So I guess to answer your question, no, it's not on there. All right. In fact, we don't even have Agnes on this particular chart either because we're talking hurricanes for the most part, although you could see some of the storms on this chart were not at hurricane strength at the time of landfall, including Irene. Not all of them made landfall. In fact, if you look at the trend from 1893 through 2012 of the most significant storms, only 3 made landfall. And we put Irene in there because of its timeliness to Sandy and goes with what I'm going to talk about with Sandy later. But most of the storms that did damage here did so without even making landfall in New Jersey. Some were off the coast. All right, so let's go through some of the storms. This one happens to be from 44. A couple kids found a police car stuck in the mud and sand. To them, it was probably pretty cool to see a police car in this fashion. Horrific for most other people to see a car that way. All right, let's go back a little bit. 1889, this is a hurricane. This is Atlantic Highlands. You could see the artist took a little liberty with the sign on the left saying guests only. Nobody, I'm sure, wants to be a guest in this. You can see the railroad track being washed out there. This is an old lithograph. Here's 19. Oh my! Can you guys see that toolbar that keeps popping up in front of me? Or is that only me?
I think that's only you.
Okay. It keeps moving on me and it's blocking my view of what I could see. I'm sorry. All right, so good old Zoom. I'm still getting used to Zoom. This is Atlantic City Boardwalk in 1889. You could see the damage done to that building, but what's more evident are those piles there, right? Those kind of, they still bark on them, for goodness. There's like trees, but that's the Atlantic City Boardwalk having been ripped up by the sea. Here's Barnegat Light in the winter of 1919. This building looks to be a goner, but they do save it. They fill it in underneath, and they are ready for the next storm. And so there's the bulkhead being built in that home right there. All right, here's 1929, the Bayhead Boardwalk. Bayhead doesn't even have a boardwalk these days. All right, let's talk about one of the biggies, the hurricane of 44. This happened in September of 1944. It's known as the Great Atlantic Hurricane. This is actually the home of my co-author, Margaret Buchholz. She grew up in this little house. They added on to it over time. And it was, if you live on LBI, you're used to floods happening from time to time. Their home was right on the bay. And here you can see in the flood in 1935. Now, when 44 comes in, she is sent home from school back onto Long Beach Island, which she laughs about today, because why would you send the kids right into an island in the middle of a hurricane? But they end up getting evacuated off the island again and taken to a hotel in Philadelphia to ride out the storm. All right, here is Monmouth County in 1944. A town called Keansburg. Keansburg's still there. Back then it had a boardwalk, but you can see it was completely destroyed. If you ever go from New York City to the shore, you might take the New Jersey coastline with New Jersey Transit, and on the bottom picture you see a stretch of that railroad line with a tugboat that was thrown up there by the sea, and the tracks bent by the power of the ocean. You can see the sailors have their laundry hanging there. So even in Sandy, there was railroad track damage. So it's, that technology still hasn't been able to prevent that kind of thing. Here's the Heinz Pier in Atlantic City in 1944. It's cut off by the sea. Let me show you a different picture. Oh, nope, it's not in there. I must have taken it out. But there were people trapped out there, and they were able to get rescued when they shot a breeches buoy out to them. Here's another shot of Keansburg from the other direction. Here's the Beach Haven Boardwalk after the 44 storm. After this, Beach Haven stopped rebuilding its boardwalks. In fact, all the lumber they were able to collect from this boardwalk damage was sold to Atlantic City and used in the Atlantic City boardwalk. So for a period of time, and who knows, maybe there might be some pieces still around, but for a period of time, Atlantic City's boardwalk had Beach Haven boardwalk wood in it. Here's Ocean City, 1944 still. Here's Holgate in 1944. This is a recovery mission as numerous people died as they rode out the hurricane of 44. They're looking for bodies here. In the distance, you can see a life-saving station. That's Bond's life-saving station. That station is along with the two homes just to the left of it. And there's you can see two peaks, dark peaks, and then a white house in front of them. Those are still there. So there's a little bit of a higher land there, and the people who stayed there would have been okay. The rest of this damage was done by storm surge, which they, in stories told from that time period, they referred to it as as tidal waves. To them, it appeared like a tidal wave. We call it more of a storm surge. But I want to share with you a quick excerpt from there of someone who saw the wave coming over. This is Elwood Barrett. He said, "We saw the wave come over the island and go across to the mainland. It took what it took. A single wave, just one big wave. I think as the crest of the wave passed by our house, it was probably 8 or 9 feet high. You could see it coming from way out, and it came at one shot. The beach at that time was relatively steep and wide, and to come across the beach and pass by our house at 8 or 9 feet, that was a hell of a wave. When that wave got to the mainland, it turned around and came back. I think people at that time said that the return wave did more damage. It just sucked everything out. The boats from the bay were now on the beach." It's pretty scary stuff if we were staying down there. Here's Harvey Cedars. And there's that little girl I talked about earlier. She is the daughter of Glenna Wilcox. Glenna Wilcox was staying with her mother, and she recounts the story of witnessing the weather get worse and worse as the day came on. Everybody knew the hurricane was passing offshore. Nobody really thought it was going to be a big deal. Her mother, Glenna's mother, was canning peaches and didn't want anyone to bother her. And so Glenna keeps telling her, "Hey, the sky looks threatening. The waves are coming over the dune." It took a lot for that mother to stop canning her peaches and actually get the kids to go to the local lumber store to use the phone to call their dad. But it was too late because the causeway was flooded out. So they're going to have to evacuate. The guys from the lumber store go to their house and help them evacuate. And this is the story of how Glenna and her mother and Glenna's 3 kids were rescued. Okay, now her kids were really little. One was just a baby they called Chub. She said, "One man took Carolyn," one of her daughters, "and one took Chub. My mother said, wait." She wasn't going anywhere without money because she never went anywhere without money, and she wasn't going to ruin her clothes, and she wasn't going to lose the money or get it wet. So she put on her garment, which was her corset. She pinned her money inside and then put on her bathing suit. Well, a bathing suit over a corset is about the worst looking thing you can imagine. The garters were dangling from under the bathing suit. Her hair was wild and her garters were flapping. I can laugh about it now, but back then I hope no one would know it was my mother. One of the men went out carrying Carolyn and another carried Chub. I wrapped him in a gray shawl with a long fringe. The water was above my armpits and I was holding the lane above my shoulders and bracing my heels in with every step and kind of feeling my way and also looking back because there were big pilings washing down. If one hit me, I knew I'd go down. The man carrying Chubb stepped in a hole where the sidewalk had washed away and it went in over his head. And I guess he automatically threw up his arms and he dropped Chubb. I saw the man come up feeling in the water for my baby, and here I am holding one baby and I can't do anything about it, and my other baby's gone. The Chubb drifted into the cedar tree in front of the Lippincotts' house, and we both saw him at the same time. He yelled and I yelled. The fringe had caught in the branches, and the man reached into the water under the shawl and scooped him up. He was hollering mad. He coughed and sputtered and started yelling right away. The water was warm. It didn't bother him much. Could you imagine the worry of that mother watching that man temporarily lose her baby while evacuating in a flood? Crazy. All right. Now, when I was a kid, I was a weather fanatic. I poured over anything with weather. We received Great Storms of the Jersey Shore, the original edition, for my mother as a 16th birthday present. And I, read that thing from cover to cover. I learned as much as I could. I was actually pretty into the 62 storm because my parents' house on Long Beach Island actually floated off its foundation and went across the street during that storm. So I used to go in the basement and look at the cracked beams from that storm. And it always intrigued me. The Great 62 storm was the benchmark storm for the Jersey Shore for 50 years. It was not a hurricane, it was a nor'easter. It was just an unlucky stretch of a nor'easter that lasted for 3 days, March 6th through 8th. It's known as the Ash Wednesday storm. And it did its damage slowly, with every high tide getting higher and higher and higher, and the infrastructure just couldn't take it. All right, so let's look at some of the damage from the 62 storm. This is Harvey Cedars at 79th Street. This storm is known for having created an inlet in Harvey Cedars, where it just scoured out a deep inlet right across the island from ocean to bay. A lot of people who stayed on the island or on the northern part of the island were evacuated to the Harvey Cedars Bible Conference, where one of the survivors took this photograph of the storm in action. You can see some of the houses already floating away. This is taken from the observation tower on top of the Bible Conference. Here's another picture. So this storm has a lot of photographs with it because pilots were able to take aerial shots during or just after the storm. Here is Loveladies, New Jersey, Loveladies on Long Beach Island after the storm. You can see the ocean fronts, they're standing high on piles. Those were the kinds of things that saved houses back then. Here is the inlet that formed. Now, Margaret Buchholz, who I mentioned before, is my co-author for Great Storms. Her father was the mayor of Harvey Cedars when this happened. So he owned a dredging company, and the first thing he did was get his dredge to start filling in that inlet. Here's her father right here. She said the only time she ever saw him cry in his whole life, was when he saw the damage from this storm. If you go to Long Beach Island today, there's a store called Sink or Swim. This building that's on the ground in the center of the picture here, that was the original Sink or Swim. Here's a picture a little bit after the storm. You can see the Army Corps of Engineers has already started bulldozing some of the sand. They laid down some trees to make makeshift roads, kind of like the old corduroy roads of colonial times, to get trucks through, get the Army Corps equipment through. That home at the top of the picture, it looks like it's sitting in the bay. That stayed in the bay all summer until on July 4th, some rowdy kids lit it on fire. Here's Brant Beach. This is Jacqueline Avenue in Holgate. That same Coast Guard station is in the background, that life-saving station I mentioned earlier in 44. At this point, it's painted white and it's a Coast Guard station, but it's still standing. It's still there today, in fact. Some more damage. This house was one that survived a lot of the storms, all the storms before it, 62. In fact, Margaret Buchholz was evacuated here in a storm once when she was a kid. She recalls eating as much vegetable soup as they would give her. This was actually owned by American Express vice president, forget his name, but he owned the estate. I believe it's all part of a religious estate, a church estate today. Love ladies. Pilings were a new technology in 62, but those homes that were built on piles survived the storm. Just like today, a lot of the homes after Sandy that were on piles survived. Anything that was on the first floor, if it was enclosed, was of course destroyed. But you can see here that those houses in 62 that had them were still standing. In fact, not too long after this photo was taken, the mayor of Long Beach Township ordered that cross braces be put on these piles so these homes wouldn't fall over. The mayor of that time, his son is the mayor today, and after Sandy, his son ordered the same thing for the homes after Sandy, that they be cross braced. Here's an electric truck. The thing with the 62 storm was that the damage was done at high tide. So if people were able to get out, like crews were able to get out to fix power lines and whatnot during low tide, some of them attempted to do it, but some of those attempts, like you saw in that last picture, failed. Here's a house that looks decently put together on one side, but if you look at the other, the floor is completely gone. Everything's still on the shelf, though. And here's a woman who lost an older house on LBI, and this is Harvey Cedars. One of the more well-known photos of the 62 storm are those that of the USS Monson, which is a U.S. naval destroyer that was being towed north, and the line snapped during the storm, and it ended up beaching itself on the southern end of Long Beach Island. The Army, so used to saying Army Corps. The Army had to come in and dynamite it out and dig it out. One man died in that process when a line snapped when they were trying to pull it out. He was killed. Right. This, believe it or not, this is a photograph of my parents' exterior steps to the second floor. The house is in the background. You can see the side door of the house. It's a duplex. Those stairs used to go up to the door on the top. So whatever the stairs are made out of must have been really good, because the stairs stayed put, the house floated away. Here's another view of that. Can you guys, see the cursor on my screen?
Yes.
Oh, you can. Okay, that's helpful. All right, this is my parents' house. This is the staircase and the pad for the front. So the house went across the street, and back then it didn't take piles and piles of red tape. Some crews came around and said, "Hey, you want your house back?" And they would roll it back and kind of put it on the foundation 2-3 cinder blocks higher than the flood line from this storm. And that's the way it was until Sandy hit. So for 50 years, it sat on a concrete foundation. There it is again. And most of these houses, believe it or not, are still there today. Just higher. All right, I called the 62 storm the benchmark storm. While we definitely had hurricanes and nor'easters and tropical storms come through in that ensuing 50 years between 62 and 2012, there was nothing quite to the level of 62. What happened, and some might even consider more devastating to the shore, was the extreme buildup of development in those 50 years. So you had 5 decades of just wall-to-wall building, overbuilding, tearing down old houses and building bigger ones, and people flooding the shore. And once the parkway was built, that was pretty much it. The shore was a destination. And you had a couple generations of people who had no experience with major storms. for decades. So when Sandy comes in, that becomes a little bit of a problem. So for a lot of people on the Jersey Shore, Sandy was their first experience with massive amounts of destruction from a storm. Okay, so we did have some storms like Belle, Gloria, Charlie. Donna is not listed there, but Donna is earlier than Belle. Bob, I remember Hurricane Bob. I was a beach badge checker. I was a kid, and they actually made us check beach badges because Bob went north fast enough where the sun came out and there was no beach. People were sitting in the dunes, but they made us go check beach badges anyway. I couldn't believe it. Floyd, that one I remember us having great sunsets, but if you lived west of the center of Floyd or far west, that brought a lot of rain and damage with it, kind of like we saw with Hurricane Henri last week. And Irene, of course, also a big flooder, but not a big impact on the shore. Nor'easters are really the one you have to worry about down the shore because they come in without the fanfare of a hurricane, and they can be sneaky and they could really do a lot of damage. Here's the perfect storm from 1991. This storm was like Sandy, whoops, but it was going out to sea, not coming towards us. Of course, the fishing boat that was destroyed in the movie The Perfect Storm, that it was more of a big event in Massachusetts. But I'm sure you remember this one. I remember it being all over the news. There's Longport. Here's a 1992 nor'easter that actually had enough wind with it to blow a roof off a house. Cape May, 91, 92. I don't know if you guys remember, maybe Paul remembers because he's a weather guy. It seemed like every news station in New York and Philadelphia had new graphic systems because it was like every single storm, like in 91 and 92, was the storm of the century. Do you remember that? Like storm of the century, storm of the century. We had more storms of the century in like a month than I could recall. But
Right. No, 1993 was the storm of the century, of the 20th century. March 93.
Also,
if you could hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the early 90s were not a fun period if you didn't like nor'easters. All right. Irene. Now, you guys are from Pennsylvania, so Irene had a little more of an impact with flooding where you were, and then, of course, in northern New Jersey. Sorry if you hear my dogs. They're barking outside right now. They're loud here. I don't know if you can hear them. Irene was supposed to be like the big one that we've all been waiting for, right? A lot of news crews were, I remember seeing news crews hovering over the island. They wanted to catch destruction right on camera. This one, a lot of people listened and they evacuated. It was a big to-do, and ultimately a lot of people felt who evacuated that they didn't have to evacuate because the shore, while it flooded, it wasn't destroyed, and the damage was pretty limited. A lot of the destruction came from flooding inland from the rainfall that typically falls in the northwest or quadrant or western half of a tropical system. Irene pretty much came in as a tropical storm and went right up the parkway up into New York. I talk about Irene because the way people reacted to Irene and what Irene ultimately did, for a lot of people, it determined how they were going to react to Sandy the next year. When I interviewed Gary Zakowski from the National Weather Service in Mount Holly, New Jersey, he pretty much says people remember their last experience with a storm. So when Sandy comes in 2012, a lot of people at the shore were like, oh, you said last year with Irene, that was this big thing. I don't know if we're going to leave this time. Some people hemmed and hawed about leaving for Sandy. That inspired Gary Zakowski to do something unprecedented and something he got a lot of fame for later. He put a personal plea into one of the National Weather Service briefings right before Sandy, basically point blank saying, this is not Irene, this is the 62 storm again. So go talk to someone from 62 and ask them if they would stay. And he showed a picture of the 62 storm with that personal plea. And that was his way of saying, this is the real deal. Sandy's coming in and she's going to do a lot of damage. And he was right. And then one of the reasons why Sandy did so much damage was because it was a powerful storm moving perpendicular to the coast, as you can see here. I think I have an arrow. There you go. When I was a kid, I actually went to Army Corps of Engineer talks. I was such a dork as a teenager. But I was fascinated with this stuff. And they would always say, well, the Carolinas always block the big storms from us. Our big worry is one that comes in and hits perpendicular to the coast. But that never happens, they said. Well, it happened in 2012, and it did everything that they feared it would do. Sandy's a very complex storm to try to explain because you had and Paul, you could correct me if I get any of this wrong, but you have a hurricane, a powerful hurricane that did a lot of damage in Jamaica and the Bahamas. We forget about that before it came up here. But by the time it gets up here, we're in a late October. So the air mass systems are not, there's no Bermuda High in control at that point. You have a high pressure blocking Sandy from going north. In the Canadian Maritimes, there's a high pressure there. You have a low pressure system coming into the Ohio River Valley. And I think I have a graphic of this. Let me see. There he goes. So you have this high pressure dome here to the north. Sandy's over here. Hurricanes don't want to go under high pressure. They want to go around. The airflow around a high pressure system is clockwise. Low pressure is counterclockwise. So here's Sandy. Can't go north. There was a brief period we thought she might go out east. But think of like a bowling ball return where you have wheels moving in opposite directions. Okay, you have this one moving clockwise, this one moving counterclockwise. Sandy really only had one place to go, and she was going to shoot west around these two systems. They're kind of like right between them. And the problem with this low pressure system was it was taking what was left of a dying Hurricane Sandy and kind of giving it some juice and spinning it up again a little bit as a nor'easter. So you have this hurricane that is dying, and when that happens, the wind field expands outward, and it's maintaining some of its power through this interaction with this low pressure. So now you have a system with decent winds over huge fetch of sea heading right for New Jersey, New York, Long Island area, and that was what was so bad about it. If Sandy came in as a hurricane and hit Brigantine, you'd see a ton of damage at Brigantine, Atlantic City, maybe Long Beach Island for sure, but it would have been limited because the farther you get away from a hurricane's eye, the wind field drops off dramatically, and the destruction usually does as well. But here we have Sandy influencing hundreds of miles of open water, and that water had only one place to go, and that was straight into the bays through inlets in New Jersey and around Long Island and into New York Harbor. And she came in with that flooding ahead of her, and then the storm surge on top of that. So it was basically like the perfect storm. They called it Frankenstorm at first, which didn't really stick. I'm glad, because I never liked that name. They thought it was clever because it was Halloween. But what the meteorologists kind of settled on Superstorm Sandy. They didn't really know how to discuss it either. One of the other problems with Sandy here, and this is Sandy at landfall, one of the other problems was the National Weather Service computer systems. You can't put up hurricane warnings for something that's not a hurricane. So when Sandy came on shore, she wasn't a hurricane. She was transitioning to a cold core versus a hurricane's a warm core, a cold core system. And even if the National Weather Service wanted to put hurricane warnings up, the National Hurricane Center is not going to do that. Computer systems they don't see like humans. They're not going to put up a hurricane warning for something that's not a hurricane. So they put up nor'easter type warnings, like gale warnings flood warnings, heavy sea warnings, small craft advisories. And that confused people a little bit because some people felt safe because there were no hurricane warnings up. They would drop them. I think that's something that they're working on changing for the future to try to convey the true impacts of systems as they come up. I think even in Henri, we saw some new storm surge graphics from the National Weather Service that showed what kind of storm surge would be coming in. I think the National Hurricane Center works with local offices on that. Anyway, I'm getting all technical on you here. I'm sorry. Sandy comes in and during the full moon and wipes out the Jersey Shore. Here's Seaside Heights, the Jetstar roller coaster that used to be on that boardwalk. Looks like a shark just took a big bite out of that boardwalk. That was a pretty iconic image the next day, the roller coaster in the sea. Maniloking, if the 62 storm, if the ground zero for 62 was Harvey Cedars on Long Beach Island, ground zero was really like Maniloking for Sandy because this neighborhood was wiped out. They lost 65 homes, and I'm not talking regular beach houses. These are multi-million-dollar mansions. This one house survived where this inlet is here. These were all houses before the storm. This is Route 35, which is a major roadway down the shore. And then it wasn't the only inlet that formed. It actually formed another one in town as well. The chief of police, who's actually the acting chief of police, John Barkas, had evacuated the police department to a Towboat US building up here on Maniloking Road. And they weren't allowing anyone, obviously, into town because of the storm. But they saw a whole bunch of police cars and fire trucks go towards the bridge. So they followed them thinking, well, they must be going to Maniloking. Why are they doing that? That's our jurisdiction. When Chief Barkas got to the western side of the Maniloking Bridge, the cops stopped him. He said, John, you can't go up there. He said, well, that's my town. I'm going up there. And he argued with them. And after a little pushback, the guy let him go up the bridge. And John Barkas told me how he drove up the bridge, got to the top, and looked down the other side. And there was a huge wall of debris being pushed up the bridge. Houses crumbled. All that pile was, the tide was pushing it up the bridge. And while he was in shock looking at this inlet, and it was dark out, so he just couldn't see anything, any houses or anything. A house hit the bridge. So he had to evacuate the bridge with all the other police officers, and they went back. And they wouldn't know for a couple of days exactly how bad their town was hit. And they were shocked when they did. He took this picture when he finally was able to get to that inlet part. You wouldn't even recognize this today. All the houses are back, and the Route 35 is back. This house is still there. This guy knew where to build a house. He must have known some secret that no one else did. But his house is still there. I think his idea was it was a little bit of a higher part of that area. Here's two houses on the southern side of the bridge. Here's that other inlet I was talking about in Maniloking. Here's Ocean Grove. That would be destroyed. Here's Holgate in Long Beach Island. This is one block over from where my parents live. This is the boulevard. It goes north-south. And then there's the ocean to the east. You can see how big the waves are still here. All the dunes are washed out. All the garages underneath these homes are washed out. This Volvo was in an oceanfront home, 2 or 3 houses off screen. That's about 4 feet of sand on the ground there. This was the view Susan and Carl Clark had. This is the other end of the side street that this previous picture was taken. Like Carl Clark took this. This is the ocean side. This is the bay side of that street. By the end of the storm, they would be watching all sorts of debris going out into the bay from the ocean. People's refrigerators, washers and dryers, hot water heaters, and eventually even a house. A house washed into that very spot, and it grabbed their car, grabbed the Clark's Ford Edge there, and parked it right in the driveway. That house looks like it was there the whole time. Nothing in that picture, in that house or that truck were there before Sandy. in the Seashell Motel in Beach Haven. That whole pool in the front, all those glass windows were blown out when the storm surge hit. And right behind those windows was a bar, a big oak bar, where Charlie Potter was checking the outlets with his coworker. And they had the beer coolers pulled out to check the outlets, and the wave hit and knocked the beer coolers onto them. So they were trapped. Their legs were pinned under these full beer coolers, and they were thinking they were going to drown because the storm surge is rushing over their faces. The firemen from the Angle side across the street rescued them. Again, I'm sorry if you hear my dogs. They're going crazy outside again. They know when I have book talks, and that's when they decide to bark. Sandy damaged a lot of the New Jersey Bay Shore. That's the area from Perth Amboy all the way to Sandy Hook that faces north towards Long Beach Island. Could you imagine how rough the bay would have to get to do this to a home? The bay actually looked like a raging ocean. Here's a neighborhood in Union Beach. Here's an aerial view of a neighborhood. This is Brook Avenue. In my book, there's a story of the people who lived right here. They had a small home and a garage on a pad with an apartment over it. And no storm had ever flooded worse than their driveway apron, so they stayed. Union Beach is a blue-collar home. People live there all year. They watched as the waves started to pound this house across the street. People who lived here evacuated to their Jeep Liberty in the driveway. You would think they would be goners, but they actually survived the whole storm in that Jeep. Never went anywhere. But the ocean did come after the couple in the book. They were staying in the house. They moved to the garage, and they watched as the bay slowly devoured their home. They watched all the contents go out the back, and then the house collapsed into the water. And eventually, where they were located in the apartment on top of the garage, that collapsed into the water. And they had to jump out of it with their 100-pound Pyrenees dog into the water, which was about 12 feet deep. They were trying to make their way from their yard to this house over here, which had a deck and stairs to a second floor deck, and the house was not experiencing as bad a flooding as them. But in that whole trial of trying to get over there, they had to go through debris. They almost drowned a couple times. The dog was drowning. The wife, Pam, to the point where she had to actually unhook the dog and let the dog go. And, hands shaking, she's letting the leash off the dog, and they watched the dog float away. And then they didn't have time to mourn the dog. They had to go and get to that deck, and they eventually did. Exhausted, they made it to their neighbor's deck. Pam passed out on the bottom deck. All her energy was gone from fighting in the water for so long. Bob, he went to the second floor, and he was going to break into the house, but the people were still home. He didn't realize that. They let him in, and they went. The husband was a Marine, and the neighbor, the wife, was a nurse. So they went. The husband went down and picked up Pam, brought her up, and his wife took care of her for the rest of the storm. And they rode out the rest of the storm in that house. Now, when the water started to go down, they heard barking outside. And would you believe their dog found them? And the dog was safe and sound on top of a pile of debris. And they were able to get down to him and rescue him too. So the dog, Molly, survived, although today she still will not go outside in the rain. She was traumatized by this event. Here's a side view of that same area I was just talking about. This was their apartment on the ground here. This is the house they evacuated to. This was their original house that went into the sea. It almost looks like tornado damage, not even hurricane damage. That's how powerful the waves were. When you drive down this road today, it's all new houses on this side, and nobody rebuilt on this side. It's just like ghostly driveway aprons with no buildings. Other seasons, other storms. If you live down the shore, thunderstorms are part of life. I don't suggest you take your camera and go up in a lightning storm to take pictures. That's dangerous. This professional photographer does this, and I yell at him all the time for doing this. But he did get a good shot. Sometimes we have crazy weather, like derechos, which are long duration thunderstorms that hold together, kind of going across the land like a bow shape, that often have severe winds with them. One of the apparent side effects of one of these storms over the ocean is sometimes that they create little meteor tsunamis. The pressure change under these severe storms can sometimes cause the ocean to bow up and down quickly, which creates like a ripple. And most of the time, it creates a barely noticeable barely noticeable wave height difference with 1 or 2 waves. But if you're at just the right angle from the origination of the meteor tsunami, it can create a bigger tsunami, which can do damage, which happened in Barnegat in June 2013. The weather was beautiful after storms earlier in the day, and people were fishing on the jetty in Barnegat Inlet. That's when the inlet water dropped significantly to the point where rocks that are never exposed were exposed. And only moments later, a wave came in and knocked everybody off the jetty and actually hurt some people. This particular wave only hit the inlet because it just happened to be in the right angle with the right focus of water into an inlet for that to happen. A similar situation happened at that same time in Massachusetts with an inlet that had a similar trajectory from the origination of the storm, or from the meteor tsunami. So it's a new science, the study of meteor tsunamis, but they're trying to figure that out to get us some early warning on those. Waterspouts and tornadoes are always the thing at the shore. In 1999, a tornado or waterspout came off the ocean and hit Holgate on Long Beach Island and ripped the roof off a motel. I remember this. I was in Holgate at the time. I was not near the hotel at the time. I just remember my mom saying she was running into town, and then she came right back and said, "I can't run into town." I was like, "Why?" So the tornado hit the hotel. Of course, I got right on my bike and rode down there, and or maybe I drove. I can't remember. I had a license then. And to see that in real life was something else. Now, I don't have to tell you guys about tornadoes. I mean, we're in a summer of a significant tornado summer. Now, you guys I don't think you have as many tornadoes yet as the record or anything like that, but you had one really significant tornado on the 29th. I'm sure you remember the Ben Salem tornado that destroyed the car dealership and did a lot of damage there. There was a tornado outbreak in Pennsylvania and New Jersey on that day, 10 tornadoes altogether. So they happen. You don't have to be in Kentucky or Kansas to get these. So when those warnings come out, make sure you listen to them. Isaias, just a quick note about that a storm does not have to be right on top of you to do damage. Isaias was inland. I think, Paul, you mentioned the tornado down near, where did you say it was? It was like Ocean City?
It was Marmora, New Jersey.
Marmora, okay. So here you have a system, right, with the center of it is pretty far inland, and it can still do damage. I mean, the eastern part of a tropical system is always where you're going to find the tornadoes and such. And winds, the highest winds. In fact, Isaias, I was out of power here. I live in Matawan, which is central Jersey. We had no power for almost a week because of that. And it was like a nothing tropical storm, but it packed a punch because the center went west of us. And one little piece of trivia, which is kind of neat. Don't tell the real estate agents I showed you this, but Tropical Storm Faye from last year, Tropical Storm Irene, and Superstorm Sandy all made landfall in a very small area between Brigantine and Long Beach Island.
Huh.
Let me show you that on a New Jersey map. In that little tiny area, you had 3 systems that made landfall in less than a decade. If somebody asked me to bet that would happen, I would never take that bet. That would be like an insane coincidence, but that's what happened. Like I said, don't tell the real estate agents. All right, so the shore and storm is perfect together. I think maybe New Jersey people get that one. That was New Jersey and you perfect together. But I hope you enjoyed this little walk through the storms. Like I said, these are the 2 books that I have out. They're Down the Shore Publishing. If you like a book, I'm giving you $10 off. Look at that. That's $35 instead of $45 for the Great Storms and $25 instead of $35 for the softcover Surviving Sandy plus $5 shipping. If you want one, just let me know. I can take Venmo over the internet. If you want to reach me, I'm on Twitter at LBI_author. My Facebook weather page is Jersey Shore Storms. And of course, you could also buy books through Down the Shore Publishing or through all the regular places like Barnes & Noble and Amazon and whatnot. All right. All right. So any questions? Thank you very much. You guys have been great. Paul, thanks for the help.
Sure thing.
All right.
Any questions, comments from anyone? Feel free to unmute yourself at this point.
I guess
Got a
the
thank
moral
you
of the
in the chat.
story.
Somebody was talking. Moral of the story. Who was that?
That was Paul.
Go ahead.
Oh,
Moral
I
of the
didn't.
story is that the development on a barrier island doesn't come without risk.
And a lot of people are saying, well, why do we keep doing this? Why do we keep replenishing the beaches? That's a big argument right now. Stu Farrell, who's like the leading beach profiler from Stockton University, I asked him that question, like, well, what do you think? He goes, well, this will stop when the money stops. And if people aren't willing to invest in the shore anymore, that's when they're going to stop replenishing. Now, what happened after Sandy, people like double and triple down. The amount of building of the shore is massive right now, and it's not little homes. They're $1 million homes like everywhere. It's insane. So it's like, I thought it was going to slow down the building. It ramped up big time. But yeah, there's that risk.
A lot of thank yous coming in on the chat. Great.
I'm going to turn off my shared screen so I can see the chat. Stop share.
Any other questions for Scott? Okay.
Oh, you guys are great. Look at you. Everybody was listening. No questions, huh?
Overwhelmed them with the power of those images and the stories. No, that was a great job, Scott. Great, really good.
I like to give you your money's worth.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, folks. Well, thanks for joining us tonight for the presentation, which can be found or will be found on the library's YouTube channel sometime next week. And thank you, Scott.
Thank you. You've been a great audience.
All right.
Paul, it's great to meet you. And Mark,
You too, Scott.
thanks.
You want to continue the conversation? I'm going to just end right now here on my end. All right. Thanks, everybody. Good night.